You know, sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones hidden in plain sight. Today, we're diving into the incredible, true story of a group of Black pioneers who built their own slice of freedom right on the American frontier. This is the story of the Roberts Settlement. So, think about this for a second. Could a community of free Black pioneers actually thrive in 1830s America? I mean, it's a question that seems to go against everything we've been taught about that era. But the story of Roberts Settlement doesn't just ask the question, it answers it with a huge yes. Okay, let's get into this. And just to give you an idea of how successful they were, look at this number. At its absolute peak, this community of farmers owned nearly 2,000 acres of land. That's over 3 square miles. So the big question is, how on earth did they do it? To really understand their journey north, we first have to look at the world they were leaving behind, a South that was becoming more and more hostile to the very idea of Black freedom. Now, what's so fascinating is who these pioneers were. These were not recently freed slaves. No, these were free people of color. We're talking about families who had been free, who had owned land for generations, some of them since before the American Revolution. They had a legacy of freedom they were determined to protect. And this slide really lays out the tough choice they were facing. Back in North Carolina, you had these new, awful Black codes and just a ton of violence and hostility, especially after the Nat Turner Rebellion. Their rights were being stripped away. But then there was the promise of the old Northwest Territory. Thanks to the Northwest Ordinance, slavery was banned, federal land was cheap and available, and, this is a huge deal, there were supportive Quaker communities who could offer a bit of safety. So you see, this wasn't just about running from something bad. This was a calculated, strategic move towards a better future. They were proactively forging a new home completely on their own terms. And these names you see here, Roberts, Walden, Winburn, Brooks, these aren't just settlers. These were families, real people who pooled their money and their courage, leaving behind everything they ever knew to build something new, together. One of the key leaders was a man named Hansel Roberts. And what you're looking at right now is his final resting place in the cemetery he helped establish. It's a real physical connection to the very land he and the others claimed. It was people like Hansel who took these huge risks to make their vision a reality. And just look at how carefully they planned this whole thing. It was a step-by-step process. First, they journeyed to the land office in Indianapolis. Then they bought their homesteads. Now, look at step 3. They intentionally settled near Quaker abolitionists for support, and only then did they bring their families out to start clearing the wilderness. This was a strategy, plain and simple. And here's the best part. We know all these details not from some old family legend, but because these settlers kept meticulous records. Their entire story is right there, written down in primary source documents that are preserved in archives to this day. I mean, just look at the proof of their life here. We're talking federal land deeds that show exactly who owned what, tax receipts, last wills and testaments passing down that hard-earned property, church records, even stock certificates for local companies. This shows they weren't just surviving, they were investing and building wealth in the region. So all of this hard work, all this careful planning, it all led to what historians now call the golden age of the Roberts settlement. This is when their vision truly came to life. And this chart just lays out that growth in plain numbers. They start in 1838 with just 10 farmers on about 920 acres. But then they expand, and by the 1870s, they hit that peak of nearly 2,000 acres. That is just a story of incredible economic success, especially considering the odds against them. This timeline really shows how quickly they went from just a plot of land to a real functioning community. The first land is bought in 35. Barely a decade later, they're already donating land for a chapel and a school. By 1858, they build the beautiful chapel that is still standing today. And then look ahead to 1924, when they start a tradition called the homecoming. We'll come back to that. So, what was the secret sauce? What made them so successful when so many others failed? Well, it really seems to boil down to these 4 pillars. Land ownership, which gave them independence, a deep sense of faith centered in their chapel, a serious commitment to education for their kids, and just a powerful, tight-knit community where families always had each other's backs. And this building, this is the physical heart of that community. The Roberts Chapel, Built in 1858, this place was everything to them. It was their church, their school, their town hall. It was the anchor for their entire life, and it's just such a powerful symbol of everything they built. Now, of course, the world changes, and while the farming settlement itself began to shrink over time, its spirit, well, that turned out to be unbreakable. And that's maybe the most important part of this whole story, how that legacy endures. I want you to listen to this quote. It's from a descendant named Cyrus Roberts, speaking at that very first homecoming back in 1924. He said the name Roberts Settlement became a synonym for honesty and uprightness. It wasn't just a place on a map anymore. It became a reputation for character and integrity. Because as the 20th century rolled on, things did change. You had industrialization, the Great Migration, and just like in so many other farming towns all across America, the younger generation started moving to cities for new jobs and different opportunities. But the legacy didn't just vanish, it transformed. The descendants of these pioneers, raised with those core values of hard work and education, they went on to become doctors, ministers, teachers, and leaders all across the country. And that homecoming tradition they started in 1924, get this, it has continued unbroken every single year since. And the best part is, this story is not locked away in a history book. You can actually go there today. You can visit the preserved chapel and cemetery, and you can even experience the new Legacy Walk, which is an interactive exhibit that brings this whole amazing history to life right on the ground where it happened. And so, this whole story kind of leaves us with a question for ourselves, doesn't it? What can this small community of 19th century pioneers teach us right here and now about the power of having a vision, the incredible strength of resilience, and what it really means to build a legacy that lasts?